So it really is an honor to be asked to be here today. To be with this panel, Egbert Perry, whose work I have watched. Integral is a wonderful company. Every city would regard itself as blessed if it had an Integral and an Egbert Perry working within that community. Dr. Norman Johnson, all you have to do is look at the Centennial School to see a wonderful concept, a vision that has been carried to fruition. I've not had the pleasure of knowing either Hope Bolden or Carol Naughton personally, but I know of their work, and I know that much of the filling out of the concept of how Hope 6 has worked in Atlanta is because of their work. And work in Atlanta it has. A couple of things. One, I can tell you honestly that the city in the country that has done the best job as a citywide proposition of utilizing Hope 6 and other revitalization funds to reinvent public housing in a city, in a metropolitan area, the best case in the country is Atlanta. And that's, of course, Renee's vision, but a lot of support and a lot of hard work. It is instructive, I think, that as many of you would be here on an afternoon like this. There's just not too many cities in the country where you could get people together at 6:30 in the evening to talk about public housing. It just doesn't happen. And then to get applause for the staff of the Housing Authority. Again, it just doesn't happen. This is a special thing. And so it was natural then when we took to chronicling, to writing the book, and it's the kind of definitive piece because this story has not been told. Hope 6 and those initiatives are one of the untold but really significant stories coming out of the Clinton years. It was natural to include a chapter on Atlanta because as we looked at the notable stories to tell, a city that regarded this as a citywide strategy, not just one project and off, not just a handful of projects, but the underpinning of an entire strategy for redoing public housing in a city. Atlanta, the story of Atlanta had to be told. So it is perfectly consistent with my experience with Atlanta that this is a city that is on the leading edge, whether it is in business or the Olympics or social justice, being really the cradle of the civil rights movement, which from here spread across the nation and has transformed our country. Literally a revolution in thinking about social justice coming out of Ebenezer Baptist Church and Sweet Auburn in Atlanta. What an amazing, amazing contribution this city has made to America. And this story of Hope 6 is another example of it. My job, I think, tonight is to share just a few thoughts on the origins of the program and as we told the story in this book. Then to participate as a member of the panel and flesh out some thinking, some ideas that might take us to the next step. So in some sense, tonight is a bit of a work session because this is a live program. It's a live proposition. In Washington right now, the administration is thinking through a new concept they are calling choice neighborhoods, which will be the successor to Hope 6. And the question is how much of the DNA of Hope 6 itself survives and what new ideas are put into the mix. There's a lot of talk, Dr. Johnson, about a parallel program to choice neighborhoods, which would be called Promise Neighborhoods. And Promise Neighborhoods is based on the work that some of you may know Jeffrey Canada has done at the Harlem Children's Zone in New York, which is a commitment to 1 square mile of truly comprehensive integration of services and care for children, the Harlem Children's Zone. It's had a lot of support from some of the major corporations in New York and Wall Street, and Jeffrey Canada has become a recognized pioneer. In fact, there's a new book called Whatever It Takes by a man named Tough, T-O-U-G-H, that chronicles the Jeffrey Canada vision, which I would recommend to you. But the merger of choice neighborhoods and promise neighborhoods by the Obama administration promises to build on the best of what's been done around the country. And so what we're talking about tonight is a live discussion in which continuing best practices, such as we've seen in Atlanta, and good ideas can get into the mix and shape the program going forward. But again, let me just begin, and I'll try to be brief at the beginning and share with you how this all started. In 1992, after years of wrestling with the conditions in public housing and watching the conditions deteriorate and watching previous administrations offer one after another of kind of one-off solutions, tear down Pruitt-Igoe in St. Louis, or try to sell off public housing to residents in other cities, the Congress had had enough. And the Democratic leadership of the Congress, it was a Democratically controlled Congress at the time, authorized the creation of a commission called the Commission on Distressed Public Housing, a panel of national leaders who concluded that there were 1 million Americans living in simply unacceptable conditions, and that we needed a massive commitment to take down the worst of the public housing, and that the only way it would be done would be to allocate enough money per development to actually transform the developments. And they recommended the creation of the program, and what emerged was this title, Hope 6, because there had been Hopes 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which were different variations on different themes, largely associated with tenant empowerment and selling off public housing. Jack Kemp, by the way, my predecessor, is a person with whom I have been very close over the years, far before he was HUD Secretary and far before I ever knew that I would be HUD Secretary. But he had a pet theme in his years as HUD Secretary, which was that what we ought to do is sell off the public housing to the residents themselves. Well, it turned out to not be an idea that could sweep across the country and be applicable everywhere, because the residents had no resources, because even if you sold it for $1, you would still have to maintain and so I think 1 or 2 developments were done in the entire United States, one in Washington and one in St. Louis, and so that idea was not going to be the answer, and the Congress finally said, look, we'll do a deal with you, Mr. Kemp. We'll accept Hopes 1 through 5, but you have to accept Hope 6. But it all came together late in '92, in the closing months of the Congress, and we know that an election occurred and Bill Clinton was elected in November, and so it fell to the new administration, the new White House, and the new HUD team to implement Hope 6.